For the last few months, I've been tracking how chemical lobbyists have sabotaged an unprecedented wave of demands to clean up America's food supply. RFK Jr. helped propel Donald Trump to the White House with promises to go after the companies they said were poisoning our food.
And don't you want a president who's going to make America healthy again?
Millions of Americans have concerns about toxins in our environment and pesticides in our food.
Now, those same corporate polluters are writing the Trump administration's regulations on pesticides. Pesticides with serious safety concerns. How did this happen? We reviewed internal emails from the Environmental Protection Agency to figure out exactly how lobbyists are fighting back, and spoke to some of MAHA's biggest supporters to see how they are dealing with the betrayal.
It's big ag, big chemical is what has captured a lot of conservative politicians.
All three branches of this government is under siege by lobbyists and lawyers from a German company named Bayer.
This is not what we voted for.
Let's start the story with her, Zen Honeyut, a MAHA activist and fierce ally of RFK Jr.
What was your reaction when you saw that President Trump had named him to this incoming position?
I cried, many other people cried. We were so excited.
Guys, it's happening.
I was had been a lifelong Democrat.
When I talked to her, the EPA had just approved the use of a controversial pesticide.
This is extremely disappointing. The EPA must take action to reduce our exposure to toxic pesticides, and that means restrictions and bans. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
The pesticide is concerning, but what's way more concerning is how it got approved.
That's clearly a glaring example of the chemical company influence over this administration.
To see if Zen still believed in Trump's campaign promises, I wanted to talk to her about these emails that offer insight into the approval process. They're about a weed killer called Dicama, and they were uncovered by Nathan Donnelly and the Center for Biological Diversity, and provide clues on how the EPA's chemical division is making decisions on all sorts of dangerous chemicals, including cancer-causing PFAS and formaldehyde.
The documents we got, just really show how incestuous of a relationship there is between the EPA's chemicals office and the industries they regulate.
Let's lay out the timeline. In 2024, 3 pesticide companies applied for new dicamba-based weed killers.
So the major problem with dicamba is when you spray it, it off-gases, and then it turns into this kind of toxic, nasty plume.
In the right conditions, that plume can travel for miles and kill or damage plants not genetically engineered to resist it.
It's, destroying habitat throughout much of the Midwest and the South. It's killing trees that were alive when Abraham Lincoln was president.
Nathan tells me studies linking dicamba to cancer, especially in the workers using it, are inconclusive, but that's concerning in its own right.
It hasn't been until the last less than 10 years where people have started to be exposed to a lot more because we're using a lot more of it. We're basically, guinea pigs in this experiment.
The EPA's first 2 approvals of dicamba were blocked after Nathan's organization and others sued. That didn't stop chemical companies from trying for a 3rd approval. And to do that, they submit a document saying, hey, here's how we, the company, think our product can be safely and legally used. But even the pesticide companies' labels weren't good enough for the people at the American Soybean Association, who wanted to spray dicamba in the hot summer months and with less buffer zones for environmentally sensitive areas.
They represent corporate agriculture, plain and simple. That's who gives them their marching orders. In fact, a lot of mom and pop soybean farmers do not want dicamba.
And so they started lobbying. On March 11th, ASA Director Kyle Kunkler wrote to an EPA official asking for a meeting on dicamba. And less than 2 hours later, staffers at the EPA jumped into action to make sure a meeting could happen that week. We don't know exactly what was said in that meeting, but we do know this. 3 months later, on June 30th, Kyle Kunkler had a new job, Deputy Assistant Administrator for Pesticides at the EPA. A week later, on July 7th, Kyle Kunkler emailed his colleagues. He had a handful of questions around dicamba's proposed rules and asked them for a meeting about it. Not even a month after that, the EPA responded to dicamba makers with its own rules for use, and it did something unprecedented. In line with the ASA, it offered rules that were less strict than even what the chemical companies themselves had asked for. Gone were some of the measures to stop dicamba's devastating drifts.
I have never seen this happen once with a pesticide approval.
But this dicamba story is just one small piece of how lobbyists infiltrated the chemical division at the EPA. Dicamba's health effects need more research. But lobbyists like Kunkler are now making decisions on pesticides that have credible links to cancer and other health issues. In just a few months in early 2025, the EPA had meetings with at least 50 industry associations and companies. Companies like Bayer manufacture Roundup and a dicamba pesticide, plus Corteva and Dow. The calendars revealed for every one meeting with health or environmental groups, they had 25 with corporate interests. In May, Secretary Kennedy released his highly anticipated MAHA report. It cites chemical industry lobbying as a factor in America's chronic health problems. By September, a follow-up strategy report was absent any mention of chemical lobbying or restricting pesticide use. "We were heard," said a prominent chemical industry lobbyist. And in November 2025, the EPA registered a new PFOS pesticide, the fifth by the agency in just a few months. PFOS, or forever chemicals, have been linked to everything from liver issues and high cholesterol to cancer.
The EPA has not taken one action, as far as I can see, to reduce our children's exposure to toxic pesticides. There's not been a single restriction and not a single ban on any of the pesticides, for instance, that have already been banned in other countries.
That shouldn't be surprising when you look at who's making decisions at the EPA.
So right now there's 4 former industry lobbyists that make every decision in the chemicals office, including the pesticide office.
They include Nancy Beck and Linda Clava, former lobbyists for the American Chemistry Council. There, DeClava fought the government's efforts to study formaldehyde's harms and downplayed research tying it to leukemia. Last year at the EPA, she worked to relax formaldehyde regulations with sign-off from Nancy Beck.
So it really all but guarantees that any decision coming out of this office is going to de-emphasize public health protections.
It's a far cry from the promises RFK and Donald Trump made to mothers like Zen.
We mothers saw a presidential candidate finally talking about pesticides and autism and childhood chronic illness and said, "Holy cow, we're being heard."
Don't mess with America's moms.
I have to point out, a lot of people voted for Trump even though it went against their political standings in the past. They voted for him even though many people despised him, right? They despised his previous actions. And they did this because of his stance on pesticides and to make America healthy again. For the Republicans to not take on that mandate of their president and to go against that is really a massively missed opportunity.
Despite her frustrations, Zen told me she is still hopeful.
We hope they turn this around. We hope they see the wisdom in the MAHA movement that reducing toxic chemicals is essential to restoring our health.
On the other hand, one senior EPA official reportedly said, "I feel the MAHA people are being played."
They're throwing MAHA a few scraps on the floor and trying to hide the fact that they're feeding a gourmet meal to the chemical industry behind closed doors.
Some people call me politically naive, but the reason why I always hold out hope is because I know that person sitting across from me, whether they're a chemical lobbyist or not, they have loved ones.
Her hope would be tested the very next day.
President Trump has issued an executive order to boost domestic production of glyphosate.
The order offered immunity to glyphosate manufacturers from lawsuits over potential health effects. MAHA erupted. RFK made his career suing Monsanto over glyphosate.
I believe that glyphosate causes cancer.
Now, he was defending Trump's executive order.
I'm telling people not to vote in the midterms.
This is basically the middle finger to MAHA.
Even before the executive order, decisions around other pesticides were creating tension in the MAHA movement.
We're seeing chat groups, then they're saying, well, I guess I'm a Democrat again. President Trump's mandate to make America healthy again, which includes pesticides. It's actually the primary focus of when Trump was on the presidential platform. There needs to be action around pesticides for the majority, I believe, of the MAHA people to be excited about the Republicans maintaining power in the House going forward. Our moms are not beholden to a political party. We are going to vote for people who put health and safety first. Period. That's it.
I spoke to several people like Zen reporting the story. I have to say, I don't agree with them on a lot, but I do agree with them on this. Lobbyists shouldn't be calling the shots on which chemicals are considered safe.
Set aside for a second the silliness and the fringe views on vaccines and raw milk and stuff like that. The core component of the MAHA movement is really quite popular. And the problem is the Democrats lost them. At some point, the MAHA movement is going to get wise to this, and they're going to realize that they were played for fools. And when that happens, I hope that some political party, some political candidates will step in and grow a backbone and take on the chemical industry and, actually be a champion of these issues, because it's sorely needed.
Nathan's organization is suing the EPA over Dicama for a third time. And in response to the glyphosate executive order, a bipartisan bill was introduced called the No Immunity for Glyphosate Act. And last year, Cory Booker introduced a pesticide accountability law. Zen endorsed it. If there was a Democratic candidate who said, we're going to empower the FDA to actually regulate all the additives being put in our food, we're not going to let the pesticide companies pollute our communities with PFOS and formaldehyde and dicamba, could they earn your vote, especially with the track record that you're seeing right now?
Yes. I think that candidate could earn the vote of many moms who are sick and tired of seeing the Republicans pander to these pesticide companies. We're tired of it.
Thank you so much for watching. If you work in the food or chemical industry and have a story that you think needs to be told, send us a line at stories@perfectunion.us. We can keep you anonymous. Again, that's stories@perfectunion.us. Thanks.